Welcome to Life by Design for Chiropractors, episode 22.
Welcome to Life by Design, the podcast for chiropractors. Here's your host, Dr. Jamie Richards.
Mike, welcome back to Life by Design for Chiropractors.
Always good to be here, Jamie. Thank you.
You're welcome. Great episode today coming down the pipe. I know a lot of people probably saw the headline and thought, what? What's going on at Life by Design for Chiropractors? And we don't want to, confuse you. We don't also want to, trick you into thinking, what we're talking about today, isn't going to have a little spin. So let's address that first, Mike. We talked about, how running a wellness practice can actually be very devastating for your business. That's obviously the caveat here is if you do it incorrectly.
And I know for me, I definitely did it incorrectly for a while. Thankfully, not long. I learned my lessons very quickly. And we'll go through some of those lessons that we learned, of course, today. But we've definitely, I think both of us done things incorrectly, and it hasn't been successful. And I can see why there's so many docs out there that really struggle with, they have this desire deep down to create this, wellness lifestyle type practice, but they really struggle at it. And, going through this process and having one of those, if you want to call it that, although I hate that word, wellness, I can definitely see why there's so many struggles. So yeah, just excited to share some of the things that we've learned over the years, things that have made our practice of the Life by Design model so successful.
Yeah, I agree. I think this episode specifically really speaks to some of the major challenges that exist. I think there's been, if we look at the profession, there's been a big shift over the time that I've even been in practice, which is only, I guess, 12 or 13 years. There's been a really big shift. And when I started practice, there was a huge movement towards this wellness practice, this, wellness approach. There was lots of, people involved in that. And I think in general, overall, it's been a positive thing. If it's done right, which we'll talk about today. And I think there's an opportunity here to build something that can be really amazing if it's done properly. But the pitfall here is that what most people have created out of gaining this information, and you see what's happened is people have gotten the information about food or about movement or about, psychological health, and they've applied it improperly in terms of a business model, and that's created a lot of devastation. I know lots of people who started quote unquote a wellness practice and used different models that existed and had a really tough time. And there's been some really good solid chiropractic practices ruined by implementing a wellness model. And I think that that speaks to the potential damage that can come from this. And as you already said, you and I, we didn't go down that path too much. But we definitely made a few mistakes that we caught early enough to recognize, that trap door that exists that a lot of people ended up going down. So I'm going to share a bit about, my story around this because I think it's valuable in this instance. And, for my first 8 years of practice, I was really a Reggie Gold follower. I loved Reggie Gold. That's how we came about with this third paradigm chiropractic model that we're promoting and leading through the chiropractic profession. But Reggie's concept was the role of a chiropractor is to check for and correct vertebral subluxation, and anything outside of that is not chiropractic. And I actually don't disagree that that's not chiropractic. Reggie always felt like there was no way you could even have these conversations, and so I basically followed suit. People would come into my practice and they'd say, hey, Dr. Jamie, I love this. This is amazing. I'm having a great experience here. But, obviously you seem to know a lot about food or fitness. What exercises should I do? Or, what food should I be eating? And I'd say, I don't know. I'm not chiropractic. That's not chiropractic. You just need to listen to your body. That was always the line. Well, you should listen to your body. Of course, I never really thought about what if their body was telling them that Doritos were the best food choice, or chocolate bars, or sitting on a couch was the best exercise because that's what their innate intelligence was telling them. So obviously tongue in cheek here a little bit, but really I was strict. I would not have those conversations until I started to recognize that having a concept around this requirement and strategy that we've now developed opened up a whole door for us to be able to communicate some of these other things that people could do to meet some of these requirements without getting prescriptive. And I think that's the key, Mike, is how do you do this based on principles and not prescriptions? So, Mike, you're an interesting situation because you came from outside of Life by Design. Mike, if you don't know, was our first office. And Mike he would never take all the credit for Life by Design, but Life by Design really started and grew because Mike asked if he could pay me to coach him through how to run a lifestyle practice. Looking back now, Mike, I mean, without, laughing at it too much, what was your first thought when you saw what we were trying to do? And, what was your vision for that? And how did you want to then bring that into your practice, and why?
Well, I think the biggest thing, the first thing I saw, actually, I think I've told you this many times, is that I saw the logo, Life by Design. It was not the same logo we have now, but it was the original version of it, and it just struck me right away. The name really struck me, and it was perfect. Everything that I had because what was happening is I had this practice, I had a successful practice, I had a busy practice. And, I was someone who just always it's who I am, always very involved in sports. My mom was a nutritionist. I mean, all the other lifestyle wellness type things were just a big part of who I am, what I did personally. And of course, I wanted to share those with my practice. But it was very disjointed in the sense, and now as I reflect back, it was very therapeutic. As far as, my recommendations were very much based on, certain, it was very prescriptive. I'll just leave it at that. And so it was just very, very disjointed. And then so when I saw that logo that one day, is that I knew that there was this incongruence and this contradiction between this idea that I was saying, that we all need to get checked because we have a spine and nerve system, and if we want to, optimize our health and be the best that we can be, we need to get our spines checked and adjusted if needed. But then I would turn around and be very prescriptive and therapeutic in terms of my recommendations around thought, around movement, and around food. And so I was just deep inside, I just knew there was this incongruence, but I kept pushing forward because I didn't really know how to, I didn't know how to present it in any other way until I saw the logo, and then it kind of clicked, and it still didn't totally click until we got on that phone that one day, and I'm sure you remember, we got on the phone, I'm like, I saw the logo, can you tell me more about it? And then you went off, and it was just such a beautiful, simple thing that just, it was so perfect. And so as soon as I heard it, I'm going to let you describe this whole idea of requirements and strategies because no one explains it better than you do. But as soon as I heard you talk about it and frame all of this, it's almost like all this stress was relieved, because this lack of integrity with my beliefs and what I was doing and recommending was really almost stressful at times. It just didn't sit right. And so when I heard it for the first time, I'm like, man, can I become an office? Can you help me through this? And let's do something with this. I mean, that's where it really all started. So I want you to tell the story about requirement strategy because nobody does it better.
Sure, I would love to. And this is really, it was at the foundation where I made the decision that, okay, I'm going to talk about food and I need to figure out how to do this. And, I saw the concept of requirements in a couple different places and thought, that's such a neat idea when it comes to food. We have these nutrient requirements. And then, being an on-purpose listener way back in the day, listened to Chris Kent. And I love that Dr. Kent talked about strategies. And he was talking about chiropractic as a strategy. And that was the first time I had thought of this. When he said it, it clicked. And I thought, if we have these different requirements, if we have these requirements for food specifically or nutrients, what's the requirement that chiropractic addresses? Chiropractic always was something that people did, even if it was subluxation based, it was still very therapeutic. Mrs. Jones, you have a shoulder problem. It's caused by a subluxation. We're going to correct your subluxation. Your shoulder problem is going to go away. Reggie was the first person to say, whether it does or doesn't go away, you're better off not subluxated. And I kind of pieced all of this stuff together and started to realize that requirements existed across the full physiological spectrum. So whether it was fuel or movement or psychology, the same requirement existed, and it was the brain to body communication or the body to brain communication. It was the function of the nervous system. And the chiropractic, properly applied, was the best and most beautiful strategy to accomplish normal brain to body communication, to correct vertebral subluxation. And I thought, why don't we just position it that way? How do we do that? And of course, there was many challenges along the way, and I would say we've definitely figured a lot of those out. And even the last 3 years, Mike, give a little credit to you with your, development in the marketing area of how we take this message and this core story and this brand story and start to deliver it to people in a way that they consume it and work through the process, get in our practice, stay for a lifetime. But long story short, this is why having a lifestyle practice can be a wonderful thing. One, because it allows you to meet the requirements for optimal physiological function. And that means you're going to get the best results with people. And when I say results, I don't mean symptoms going away or disease is going away, although that happens all of the time. What I'm suggesting is to be optimal, to be at your best, you need to meet all of the requirements. No different than a flower, right? It needs soil, sunlight, nutrients, carbon dioxide. You can't stick a rock up against the stem and expect it to grow in its most optimal way. The same is true for the physiology of the body. So having this style of practice properly positioned allows you to get the best results. And, one of the things I think is interesting, if you look at the manuals, and if you haven't downloaded the manuals, you can check those out. You can go to the show notes, actually, Mike. I'll put them in the show notes. And you can go grab the Eat, Move, Think, and Power by Design manuals. One of the things we're really quite proud of, although we're updating them, in the future here, and there's really not that much to update. We had this conversation last week in our weekly meeting, putting this on our objective list for the upcoming, next couple quarters. There really wasn't a lot to change. And one of the big reasons there wasn't a lot to change is because we've based those manuals off principles and not prescriptions, right? It's not, okay, you need to take fish oil because you have heart disease, or you need to reduce your carbohydrate intake because, you need to reduce inflammation. Those things happen. You need to take fish oil because it's normal to have optimal omega-3 to 6 ratios. You need to eat the appropriate amount of carbohydrates because that's just how your body's designed. And if you eat more than your body requires, it's a problem. If you eat less than your body requires, it's a problem. So focusing everything around requirements and strategies has literally transformed, in my mind and in my practice and yours and in many other ones, transformed the way a lifestyle practice can operate while still keeping chiropractic and what you love at the core centerpiece. So, that's kind of the basic foundation of it, Mike. One of the other big reasons why we love this style of practice is marketing. So talk a bit about, why having a lifestyle practice can actually be a great way to market what you do.
Yeah, I think you've touched on a couple of the really important reasons why this is so valuable. Of course, that it gets the best results. However, I think one of the biggest advantages to having this type of practice is actually on the other side of it from a business perspective, and it's to do with marketing and attracting new people into your practice. And the reality is, and we've talked about this a lot on the podcast, and virtually every podcast, I feel like we've touched on this at some point, that people just don't care about chiropractic. In fact, they really don't have a lot of interest in even taking care of their spine until something goes wrong a lot of the time. Unfortunately, that's just the reality of it. And so it's very important that we understand that, and that when we study our avatar, study our community, a lot of them aren't sitting there going, I'm really struggling with my spine. That's not a conversation that, a lot of people are having, with themselves. They're not looking for chiropractic. And so we need to talk to them about problems that they are actually having. And so using, food and exercise and self-help type topics and mindset, those are things that people do care about, whether we like it or not. I'm not saying that's a good thing, but that's just the reality of it, is that people are searching for food, for exercise, and for advice on how to, have a healthier mind. They are looking for those things. And so having this type of practice and having a model for this allows us to speak to people in our community, these ideal practice members that know they need those things. They know they need to eat better. They know they need to move better. They don't necessarily know that they need to, take care of their spine yet. But what we can do is kind of the old Trojan horse, is we can use exercise and nutrition and mindset to actually give them information that they care about, that they want, that they're searching for already, and use it as a way to actually open the conversation about all of the requirements and strategies. And then, of course, that allows us to start to discuss chiropractic and the importance of taking care of your spine and your nerve system, getting your spine nerve system checked on a regular basis. That opens up the conversation, because if they're thinking in their head, well, okay, I'm listening to Dr. Jamie, and he's telling me that I have certain requirements and strategies. Of course, food is a requirement, and these are the best strategies that we know of based on the science of today. That totally makes sense. And so if you present chiropractic in that same framework and say, listen, it's, chiropractic is always, I always say this in my seminars, and I think it always takes people aback and they're kind of startled that I say it, but I always say, listen, chiropractic is not a requirement. And they're kind of like, huh? Chiropractic is a strategy, right? The requirement, we know that every human being requires an optimal spine and nerve system to be super healthy. That's the requirement. And chiropractic just happens to be the absolute best strategy that we know of to accomplish and fulfill that requirement. And so if they're going to accept that logic for food and exercise and mindset, then, if they're going to stay in integrity, they need to accept it as far as the spine and nerve system goes. And that allows you to start having this open discussion about chiropractic and it's, their requirement to get their spine checked.
Yeah, just even you saying that gives me goosebumps. I remember the first time that I really said this. It was 2011 or 12, and I can't remember exactly, Mike, but at the Lyceum in New Zealand. And, I had this conversation when I was speaking there, and I tell you, it hit the whole crowd. I remember, people coming up after, and we had lots of discussions about it. But, I think for a lot of people, it's the first time they've ever considered that people don't need chiropractic, especially very passionate, dedicated chiropractors who've seen thousands of people help through chiropractic care. They've never actually considered that people don't need chiropractic, right? So you need food, you need air. Those are needs, meaning those are requirements. The requirement, as you said so well, is normal brain-to-body communication, normal neurospinal function. Once people accept that, they just are looking for the best strategy. That just happens to be you. And the other part of this, why this is so great to position yourself this way, is when it comes to food and movement and psychology, there's a million games in town. But when it comes to brain-body communication, you're the only game in town. If that doesn't get you excited, that if people could understand through this process and bridging this gap, that the importance of their brain and nervous system and spine in their overall function and their health, if they could get how important that was, they would be searching for an expert to help them address it. You're the only person they can choose from. How much better does that get in terms of marketing, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. The best evidence for this is just go even on Facebook. We've talked in recent episodes about using Facebook Insights to see what posts you put on your office Facebook page get the most traction or the most views, engagement, what have you. And just look through that, or look through your blog history and look to see which blog posts have been the most popular. I guarantee the ones that are chiropractic related are the ones that are the least popular of all the posts that you make. And the ones that are the most popular are something to do with food, exercise, or mindset, guaranteed. And so, you need to use those other topics to really attract more people in your community to your brand, and then start to build that relationship through regular content, which is a whole other discussion.
Yeah, I think, I know this out of experience, and trust me, guys, if you're listening, it is so tough to let go of this, being a passionate third paradigm chiropractor. So I get it, but you have to understand what your market wants, and you have to be able to help them get that and then bridge the gap to what you want them to get. And until you understand that concept and let go of, what you want them to understand, and you're shoving it down their throat and you're expecting them to get it, it's just going to be extremely stressful for you. There's a much easier path that can still get you to the same place. I would even contest a better place. So Mike, let's jump in, because this show is going to get soaked up here pretty quick. Let's jump in to the biggest mistakes that people make when they're trying to run a lifestyle practice. And then we'll talk about how to not make those mistakes and give you guys some action steps that you can take here to actually start to try and put some of this into play. So number one, huge one, obviously, is they're therapeutic. And, a couple different variations here. You could be perfect with chiropractic, third paradigm, core problems, we correct core, all that kind of stuff. But then all of a sudden you want to talk about food, and you're talking about, take this vitamin for that, and take, vitamin A because you have, whatever, colic. I don't even know. I don't even know. I don't know what they are, because that's not what I do in my practice. But this is what happens, is you become a natural dispensary, and sure, you think you've got chiropractic, which is wonderful, but you're dispensing therapeutic information in all the other areas. Or what I actually think we see more often is people thinking that they're practicing, third paradigm chiropractic, but they're actually therapeutic in every area. And by talking about all the other areas, they get to hide chiropractic in there a little bit. And I think part of this, and for better or worse, I think part of this model was born out of newer chiropractors who are weaker in chiropractic. They're weaker in the principle of chiropractic. They don't understand the strategy. They don't understand the science. And so because of that, they don't value the chiropractic checkup and correction like it was, say, 20, 30 years ago. But they understand that food is scientifically established and movement. So they like to hide their chiropractic in there. That's a big problem, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that, and then that's the big thing here, is that done properly, what this should do is highlight chiropractic. Right?
Yes.
It should make it should just shine the light on chiropractic. It shouldn't be hiding chiropractic. Chiropractic needs to come to the forefront. It needs to be, and this is something that I think people are always really shocked about, but I would say that 99% of my conversation in my practice is about chiropractic. When someone asks me about food or exercise or mindset, people are oftentimes shocked. Like when we have other docs come in to shadow us or what have you, to kind of see how we do things and how we integrate all of the Life by Design steps. They're shocked that I'll have a busy day, and I will not mention any of those things even once. And even I think my practice members are trained now to know that my answer to their question about what they should be eating or is going to be, if it's a quick answer, of course, I'll give them that quick answer. My answer is going to be, remember the manuals, go back and read them. The answer is in there on page so-and-so, or, I'll send you an email with a further resource to answer that question. Or you haven't been to the seminar yet. You haven't been to the Eat by Design seminar. You need to be there. So I'll see you there. I promise you we're going to answer that in a lot of depth. But that's it. It's not I don't sit there tableside for 25 minutes answering a question about how much carbohydrate they should eat. And people are oftentimes shocked that I actually refuse to answer those questions. I don't refuse outright, but I explain to them what the step should be. And it's not me sitting there explaining, something about what food or what exercise they should do. I want to spend all my time in practice talking about chiropractic and helping them along that process through the different stages of their care. That's the focus. It's never about all these other lifestyle things that they should be doing. Yeah, no, exactly. And it is. It's uncanny how many times one of the students or doctors will say, you actually never talked about anything to do with anything else about Life by Design. That's because that's why we have workshops. That's why we have manuals. That's why we have other steps, which we'll talk about in a second. That leads me to the second mistake people make. Not only are they therapeutic, but even worse, I would actually contest this is worse. They try to be the trainer. They try to be the nutritionist. They try and be the self-help guru, the psychologist. And it's a terrible idea. Terrible. I mean, I can't even think of a worse idea than trying to be everything to everybody. You want to dilute chiropractic, then just be everything in your practice. It's a horrible idea. And we've had this conversation with lots of clients where I think they naturally think that that's the next logical step. I know a lot about fitness, so I want to be their coach. I know a lot about nutrition, so I want to do their meal planning. Terrible, terrible idea. If you want to be the man or the woman that people look to, the doctor that people look to, and you want to have chiropractic centralized, not diluted, but centralized in your practice, then you need to be just that to people. And you can have other people. You can refer to other people. They can be a part of your team. We'll talk about that in the how-to, but that's the second mistake. And the third mistake, before we jump into the how-to, is you can't dilute chiropractic by making it the same as everything else. So, if you communicate, yes, there are requirements, there are strategies. And we talk about 4 specific ones: brain, body, communication, food, movement, and psychology. And those are all requirements, and there's different strategies. But we don't dilute it where it's 25% of everything. It's chiropractic as a strategy, and the brain-body connection as the core requirement is the most important piece.
and your food and your movement and your psychology support what you're doing in your practice. So the way we frame it up, is these are workshops that aren't just, hey, you're going to come learn about nutrition. These are central components to going through the restoration process or the correction process or whatever you've named your process or objective in your practice. And what it does is it puts chiropractic on the pedestal, and it actually puts the other things down below in their place. You know what? Naturally, people are going to elevate those on their own. You don't need to spend any time making nutrition, exercise, and adapting to stress any more important, because people already think it's important. What you do need to do is spend your time putting chiropractic on the pedestal, and there's a couple of ways that you can do it, and we're going to talk about those now. But any other mistakes you want to throw in there, Mike? Or I think that hits the main ones.
Yeah, I agree. I think that covers the all the different mistakes you can make fall into one of those three categories.
Yeah, I would agree. So let's talk about how to actually do this. And I think the first step is it's all about positioning. And I've learned a lot about this over the last 4 or 5 years, and it's made a massive impact in my practice. And really anything that I've done, I realized the importance of knowing what you're trying to accomplish. And who would have thought you should actually know what your outcomes are before you start doing a bunch of different action steps. But nonetheless, knowing what I'm trying to accomplish with people allowed me to position chiropractic properly. So similar to what we talked about before with, diluting it and making it all the same, chiropractic in this model as a strategy to correct core problems with the spine and nervous system. That's it. And when you have that as your core central component, like I said, all the other things become supportive of that, not ancillary to that, not a piece of the puzzle. It is chiropractic addressing the problem with the spine and nervous system, and the other components helping support that process. The second how-to, and I'll let you talk a little bit about this one, Mike, because this is something that you were key in developing, is, just give them the basics. And then once you have the basics, then they can take and run with it. So talk about how you put this into your practice and why this is, a key component to, not going down this slippery slope.
Sure thing, Jamie. There's two key pieces to delivering this program in our office, and the first one is the manuals. Jimmy, I think you said you were going to include those in the show notes for everyone to download if they haven't seen them. And so that's one piece. So it's giving them a resource that's going to, give a nice general overview of all the information that you want them to have. The second piece is, of course, regular workshops. So I think it's been I've calculated we've done over 100 different workshops now over the years. We have not missed a month, I think, in the last 7 years. Every single month we rotate Eat, Move, and Think by Design on a regular rotating schedule, and we haven't missed one of those. So those are the two key components. When you come to a workshop, you get the manual, and of course you get this hour to hour and a half in-depth workshop, plus you get the manual. And my thinking is that I want to give them enough information so that the proactive person in the room, the person that's really engaged in this and is willing to actively take action and realize that they're going to have to do some stuff to actually get these results that we're talking about. There's enough information there for them to actually take the information about food, for example, and start to implement it right away. There's going to be a whole host of other people in the room, though, that are going to need more help, okay, for whatever reason. And so that's where, what we've done, again, to make sure that I don't take my focus off chiropractic, is that I don't want to spend any more time developing a meal plan or developing a series of exercises for them to do, or even just showing them how to do a series of exercises. What we've done is created a next step, something else for them to do. So for example, when it comes to food, we have, of course, Eat by Design coaching. Of course, it's easy for us because my wife is a nutritionist and that's what she does for a living, and so that's easy for us. She's our expert, but it doesn't mean that you and your community can't find a nutritionist and work with them and find someone, of course, that's consistent and congruent and understands chiropractic and how all these things fit together. But you want to have someone else who can take over after those simple early steps. So the workshops are a great thing that you can, again, market to your community and get people who aren't in your practice yet. It's a chance, an easy, low barrier opportunity for them to get into the practice for the first time. This is also a great opportunity for your current practice members or patients to actually invite guests, another way for you to get new blood into the practice. So again, very, very valuable marketing opportunities that lay there. So the idea here is they come to the workshop, they get the manual, and then if they're looking for a next step that we have a next step for them. We're not trying to be the nutritionist. We're not trying to be the trainer. So it's giving them enough to take action for those very action-oriented people, but not going too far down that path and, becoming the jack of all trades.
Yeah, great point, Mike, about not going too far down the path. I think a lot of people who want to continue on and develop more and more and more stuff for the people in their practice, I don't think they're clued into that, 2 to 5% of the people are actually going to care about going that far down the path. So it's a lot of time and energy that's not going to pay off. Most people just need the basics. If people would even do 20% of the basics that we give them, Mike, they're going to be, million miles ahead of where they were, say, 6 months ago or 12 months ago. The other two components of how to do this, guys, and we'll leave it at that, and definitely check out the show notes because we're going to put the manuals in there. If you haven't registered for LifeCon yet, definitely do that. Best LifeCon ever. Topic this year, as you know, was marketing like it's the year you live, like this year, maybe even next year, not like it's 1992. I'll throw a link in there for Eat by Design coaching as well because, you could find your own nutritionist or you could check out Eat by Design coaching. They have a lot of great things going on. The last two pieces, the checklist is one of them. We use a checklist in our practice in all of our Life by Design offices, and that comes out at re-examination or review of results time and kind of check the boxes. Are you doing this? Here's where you are in the corrective care process. You're now in the optimization program. And we're revisiting and having a conversation very consistently with people. Have you ever done a checklist? If I give you a checklist with 10 things on it and you bought into the purpose of the checklist, how many of those things do you want to get done? All 10. Nobody likes to have a checklist with 8 things checked off. Everybody wants 10 things checked off. So the checklist allows people to have this, this future development, and they're always moving towards something. There's always a next thing, a next thing, a next thing. And that goes on forever and ever and ever. So people buy into your brand and your story, and they buy into your process. That's how you build a lifetime practice member because they want to get the best results and they want to continue the process over their lifetime. The last piece that I'll leave you guys with, wrapping all of this up, done properly, one of the best reasons to run this style of practice and do it right is the community. It's the community that this creates. It's something amazing when done properly. It takes time. And when I say time, I mean years. The commitment to this type of practice, you can see some great results early on, increase profits and increase impact, better retention, all these really cool things that are positive, make you feel good about what you're creating. But if you can really get your head around this and create a vision, you fast forward this 5 years, even 10 years, definitely, you could build a community. And I know a lot of chiropractors have an idea of what they want their community to be like, but they just fall short continuously because they're making so many of these mistakes along the way. And if you can get this right and get this framework down and dedicate yourself to putting it into action, be committed to it every single week. Mike said he hasn't missed a workshop in 7 years. How many workshops have you canceled because, only 2 or 3 people were booked in or you didn't want to do it? 7 years. That's consistency. That's sticking to the plan. And fast forward in Mike's community, he has a community. He has his office. He has his CrossFit. He has people around town talking about him. We have the same thing at the center, the same thing at some of our other locations. Guys, the potential here is enormous, but it won't happen overnight. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to take some time, and it's going to take knowing what to do and implementing it properly. So guys, go to the show notes, lifebydesignforchiropractors.com/podcast. You can find it there. And thank you for listening in to Life by Design for Chiropractors, the voice of reason in chiropractic.